Hello and welcome to part 8 of Knitting Machines for Beginners. I'm Charlie, hello. Today we're going to learn about partial knitting, which is where you knit some stitches but not others. Now, it's very important before we start that we talk about the carriage. Sorry about the dodgy lighting. But as you can see, as I move over these needles, which are right the way forward in holding position, they don't do anything, which means that any stitches that are on those needles will just not knit. Okay, now I've got some buttons I can push, and the P stands for partial knitting. If I push these buttons, what it will do is, instead of not knitting it, it'll knit them back into normal working position. If you push one button but not the other, on this particular knitting machine model, you get some weird effects for patterning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push both buttons, and you will see that as I go, it knits them back to normal position. And then we are knitting again. So I need to start without that pest. The R button is just the reset. So with that made clear, I'll get some knitting on here and then I'll show you what we might do in terms of partial knitting. Right, so here we have a stretch of knitting, and I want you to imagine that we're knitting something like the front of a jumper and we need to do a V neck. So what I want to do is I want to end up with a V shape going up like that, starting from the middle. Okay, so I can't increase and decrease because it'll just simply knit across the middle. So I'm going to knit the sides one at a time. I'm going to do it in two different methods. I'll do the right hand side in one way and the left hand side in another way. Now it's very important at this point that I've got my carriage set up so that it does not knit over needles that are all the way forwards. And I'm going to start by pushing all of the needles left of 0 forwards. So none of the left hand side of this is going to knit at all. However, what's going to happen is I'm going to knit fewer and fewer and fewer needles here, so this end ends up getting much longer than this end. We'll end up putting a big sort of baggy dart in this bit, which will form our V-neck. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to hang a weight on the inside, okay, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring forward a needle into holding position every time I'm on the left hand side. Now I have to frequently move my weight so that I'm constantly pulling the edge of the knitting off, because I'm creating a dart which doesn't have much in the way of tension on it. I'm doing this every single row. If you're doing a genuine V-neck, you might do it every third or fourth or sixth row. Now then, you can see this is lovely and swift. And I'm knitting fewer and fewer needles. With the effect that I now need to hang this right on the end. One thing you will see is that it fluffs up the stitches, that it goes over again and again an awful lot. Right, there we go. So what I've done, you might be able to see if I pull it out, is I've created a great big baggy dart there, which is going to look a bit like a V when I've done. So that's one way of doing it, and that's very effective. And when I take the knitting off at the end, you'll see that it spreads out in a V shape. Now, in order to do the other way, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to put all of the other side back into working position, which I'm going to have to do with a latch tool, or sorry, with the transfer tool, my apologies. And I'm going to do that by pushing these back and putting them back onto the stitches. Now you can do it just by pushing the needles back some of the way and hoping. I've never done that because the danger is that you move the carriage across in a lovely grand movement and drop an entire half of a jumper that you spent hours knitting back into position. So I've never done that. Right, I'm just going to pause and I shall come back when we are ready to go. Right, now in this method, I'm just going to cast off or transfer decrease stitches on this edge going along, which means you should see a much more obvious V shape happening. I've actually broken the yarn, so we're going to have some ends of yarn to weave in at the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go across and knit a couple of rows, and then I'm going to get my transfer tool. I'm simply going to transfer a stitch across and take that one out of work. I'll do it again. Again, making sure that the needle you've taken out of work you push right the way back. Okay, and every time I do this, the knitting gets a little bit shorter. Okay, I'm just going to hang a weight on there. Now, as you can see, this takes significantly longer. And the advantage of this is that you are casting off essentially as you go. So with the other side, I'm going to have to find a way of casting off all 20 odd stitches. With this one, when I get to the edge, I've reduced all the stitches. I've got to cast off all the way down there. I could make it a fully finished edge if I felt like it, using a 2 or 3 latchet tool. Oh, I can't build for the moment. So I'm just doing this all the way down. And you should be able to see a V forming. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video at this point until I've done this all the way down, and then I'll show you the finished result in a minute. Right, so that's me finished, and as you can see, on the one side you can see the V created already. On the other side it hasn't been created yet. We've got the dart sort of still there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it back into a knit everything mode. I'm going to take the yarn out of the yarn feeder, and I'm going to knit across with no yarn. It should just take it straight off, like so. Right, now then, let's have a look at this. Now, obviously I haven't cast off, so this is all very loose, but you can see now I've got myself a nice V. This lot is all cast off, all nicely. This lot is not and needs to be cast off, but was quicker to knit in the first place, so it's personal preference really. And there we go. That's how you do partial knitting. I shall see you next time when we talk about hems.